Hello everyone. Today we are talking about two ideas that go hand in hand: early intervention in mental health and a specific tool built to make it possible: mental health first aid. The core idea I want you to walk away with this is that most mental health struggles don't come out of nowhere. There are warning signs, and there's a window of time when a small, well timed response can change the entire trajectory. Our job today is to understand that window and to understand a practical evidence-based way that everyday people, not just clinicians, can respond within it. Let's start with basics. Before we can talk about intervening in mental health, we need a shared definition of what mental health actually is. WHO defines it as a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with stresses of everyday life, realizes their ability, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. Notice what's missing from this definition: the word illness. That's intentional. I want to highlight three things about this definition. The first is that mental health is more than the absence of diagnosis. You don't need to have a disorder to have a poor mental health, and you don't need to be symptom free to have a good mental health. The second is that it is continuum. All of us move along a spectrum that is from thriving to striving to struggling, and that position can shift day to day or year to year. It is not fixed label. The third is that mental health is foundational. It affects how we handle stress, how we relate to people around us, how we learn, how we perform at work, and it is not a side issue. It underlines almost everything else in our life. With that shared foundation, let us look at why timing matters so much. Three numbers I want you to remember. 50% means half of all lifetime mental illness is already established by age 14. 75%. 3/4 of it is established by age 24, and 70%. That's 7 out of 10 children with mental health problems did not get help early enough. When you put all this together, you can see the shape of the problem, that mental illness overwhelmingly starts young, but our system, our awareness, and our willingness to act often catch up late. The gap between when the problem starts and when someone finally gets help is exactly what early intervention is designed to close. Early intervention isn't about predicting the future or diagnosing someone in a hallway conversation. It's simply about noticing early warning signs and connecting someone to support before a problem escalates into a crisis. So what happens when we don't do that? Let us look at the cost of waiting. When support is delayed, four things tend to happen, and they tend to compound each other. The first is that the symptoms deepen and become harder to treat. What starts as mildly difficulty can progress into a more entrenched, more diagnosable condition the longer it goes unaddressed. Second, the functioning suffers, such as school performance drop, work productivity drops, there's a strain in relationship. These are not separate problems, they are a downstream effect of untreated mental health issues. Crisis risk rises, and the fourth is that treatment becomes costlier and longer. This raises an obvious question: if an early intervention matters this much, how do we actually equip people to do it? That's where mental health first aid come in. Mental health first aid is a public education program. The core idea is simple. You don't have to be a therapist or a doctor to help someone. You can be anybody. You can become a mental health first aider. Just like one trained to do CPR, an ordinary person trained to do CPR to respond to physical health emergency before medical help arrives, MHFA trains ordinary people to recognize and respond to a mental health challenge before a clinician is involved. Few facts that you need to know is that this is modeled directly on traditional first aid. Here you are not diagnosing, you are also not treating someone. Here you are stabilizing the situation and connecting the person to appropriate help. It is typically delivered in an in-person or blended course somewhere between 6 to 12 hours taught by a certified instructor. It can be adapted for different audience, youth, adult, through teen MHFA, older adults, and specific settings like workplace, school, and public safety environment. And critically, its developer explicitly framed it as an early intervention program. The goal isn't to be useful only during crisis, it is to reach people before one. On the right bit of history about MHFA, it was developed in Australia in 2000 by Betty Kitchener and Anthony Jorm, and it's since been adopted in more than 25 countries. In US alone, more than 5 million people have now been trained. So we know what it is and where it comes from. So how does someone actually use it in the moment? That's the LG action plan. The LG is a 5-step framework taught in every MHFA course. It's a practical core for whole program. The thing a trained first aider actually does. So A stands for assessing risk, where here you approach a person and assess and assist with any immediate risk of suicide or self-harm. This always comes first because safety is priority. L is listening non-judgmentally. You give a person space to talk. Your job here isn't to fix or advise, it is to let them be heard without judgment. G is for giving reassurance and information. Offer honest reassurance and accurate information about the situation so they don't feel alone or confused. E is for encouraging appropriate professional help. Here you support them in taking the step toward professional help, such as doctor, counselor, or crisis service. E is for encouraging self-help and other support. You point them toward peer support, family community resources, and self-help strategies that reinforce professional care. So one important nuance we have to remember is that these steps don't have to happen in strict order. A trained first aider can move fluidly between them depending on how the situation unfolds. It's a flexible framework and not a rigid script. Let us talk about whether it actually works. This is the evidence slide, and I want to walk through it carefully because it's a backbone of everything we have said so far. The chart shows effect size, a statistical measure of how much change a training produces. This was pulled from 2018 systematic review and meta-analysis that pooled results across 15 separate studies of MHFA. The largest gain was knowledge and intention to help. The effect size we can both see is 0.5. Recognition of disorder and confidence to help were solid in high 0.3 to 0.4 range. Helping behavior, whether people actually followed through and helped someone, showed a smaller but still improvement. And stigma reduction showed the smallest shift of 6, which tells us that changing deep-seated attitude is the hardest thing to move, even with structured training. On the right side, 3 things reinforces this. The 2018 meta-analysis found consistent gain in knowledge, recognition, and confidence. Improvement in helping behavior and stigma were also observed and were generally maintained as follow-up. Not just an immediate post-training bump. An independent randomized control trial in Sweden, Australia, and Switzerland found similar results, which gain still measurable 6 to 24 months later. In short, this isn't a program that just make people feel good about workshop. It measurably change what they know, how confident they are, and to meaningful degree what they actually do. Here are 3 real-world settings where this can actually be implemented and studied. In UK, employer trains staff as workplace mental health first aider. The Empower Cluster randomized trial evaluated whether having this trained employee on site actually improved help-seeking behavior and well-being across the organization. We're testing whether early intervention work not just in theory but inside a real workplace culture. Teen Mental Health First Aid is a universal program that teaches adolescents themselves to notice signs of distress in their peers, to encourage them about adult health. A 12-month randomized trial found sustained improvement in mental health literacy and reduced stigma among the students who were trained, meaning peer-to-peer early intervention can work and the effects last. Moving on to the community level, New York City trained more than 155,000 residents in MHFA between 2016 and 2020. The participants learned active listening skills and how to guide people through professional care, making this one of the largest city-level early intervention effort in the country. Three very different settings: a workplace, a school, and an entire city, but the same underlying logic. Train ordinary people, close the gap between the first sign of trouble and professional help. We have talked about mental health as a global concern, but nowhere is the treatment gap more visible than here. India's National Mental Health Survey found that 10.6% of adults live with a mental disorder, yet roughly 83% of them don't have access to care. That is not a small gap. That's the vast majority of people who need support simply not getting it. Early intervention and mental health first aid are two of the tools being used to try to close the gap at three very different levels. Infosys and NIMHANS Workplace Aider, the India's leading mental health institute, they partnered to co-develop mental health first aid training manual. Rather than just training a few specialists, they certified their HR team across country as first responder. In the middle, we move from one organization to entire country. Telemanus, it's a 24/7 mental health helpline, 14416. Coordinated by NIMHANS, running through 53 cells with more than 600 trained counselors, offering free confidential support in 20 languages. On the right, we go rural. The NIMHANS ECO program is a tele-mentoring initiative that paired NIMHANS specialists with primary care provider in Chhattisgarh, a state where mental health specialists are scarce. Now, let us bring all this together. 5 things I want you to leave with today is that mental health is a positive state of well-being, not simply the absence of illness. WHO definition frames it as something everyone has and something everyone can strengthen. Most lifetime mental illness begin young, making early intervention a narrow critical window. Mental health first aid equip everybody with simple evidence-based action plan to notice, respond and connect someone to help. The research is consistent. Mental health first aid training improves knowledge, confidence and helping behavior, and millions of people have already been trained worldwide. The fifth is that early intervention and mental health first aid work together. Awareness plus trained bystander is what actually closes the gap between the first sign of struggle and professional care. That's the case for early intervention, and that's the tool built to deliver. These are the references. Thank you so much.